Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the final of the classes for the Basic Program Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which is being conducted this year since January. So we'll begin as normal with the prayers, which I'll lead. So taking refuge and generating bodhicitta, just preparing our motivation. Sangye chodang soke chognam la janshu badu dagni kapsu chi dage jin soge pesonam ki drola panche sangye drupa shog. Sangye chodang soke chognam la janshu badu dagni kapsu chi Dage jinsoge pesonam ki drola panche sange drupa shog. Sange chodang soke chognam la janshu badu dagni kapsu chi. Dage jinsoge pesonam ki drola panche sange drupa shog. His Holiness advises reciting the following prayers prior to a commentary on the Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Abandon evil doing. Practice virtue well. Subdue your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. Like a star, an optical illusion or a flame, a magical illusion, a dewdrop or a bubble, like a dream, a flash of lightning or a cloud, so should one consider all compounded things. By this merit may I attain omniscience and overcome our enemy, our harmful deeds, and may beings buffeted by the waves of birth, old age, sickness and death be liberated from the ocean of existence. The Heart of the Protection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagawan was dwelling on a mass of vultures mountain in Rajagir, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feelings, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no mind element and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance and so on, up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely upon and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is just like that. It is like that. One should practice a profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharatvattaputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, Asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. And His Holiness also recommends reciting the praise to Manjushri in recognition of Shantideva's incredible close connection with Manjushri. Homage to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds to his heart a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of a father for his only child, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. You whose princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages achieving the highest perfections of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning, I bow down to you, Manjushri, Umarapatanati. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. And the outer and inner mandalas, and the mandala offering for requesting teachings. Sashipoki Jushin Meitog Pramri Rablingji Nidan Adi Sange Ji Mite Yoba Ki Kunanda Pasho Pasho Dagi Chadang Monsun Ke Yudranyen Basum Lu Dang Long Chu Che Pan Pa Mi Pa Bugi Le Je Ne So Ra Satro Ji Jesu Lama Jampake Nam Hi Chuku Ka Kesen Tu Si Tri Jita Sampe Tu Jezi Ma Lazar Choki Chapawatu So Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. So it's now 3 weeks since the passing into para-nirvana of our most precious kind, Kabje Zopa Rinpoche. As this is the last week of the delivery of our basic program, Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, I've sought to pay homage to Rinpoche and to quote his luminous words of advice as a conclusion to this unit. But Rinpoche's energy pervades the entire presentation, as bodhicitta was and is his favourite subject. As Rinpoche advised, I quote, "The benefits of bodhicitta are boundless. If we tried to explain them all, the explanation would never end. We should read books like the Kunu Lama Rinpoche and Shantideva's again and again," end of quote. So studying this text together, helping one another as we proceed, is exactly what would delight Rinpoche. In this way, we make an offering of our practice from our hearts, not for our own sake, but on behalf of all our suffering mother sentient beings. Regarding reading the Kunu Lama Rinpoche's and Shantideva's books again and again, it appears that we'll have an opportunity to do this in our own way in the form of this commentary continuing again in January of 2024. This is thanks to the kind consideration of the Venerable Dondruk, the manager of Thupten Norbu Ling. The plan is that we'll commence from where we leave off today. I understand that these teachings starting in January of next year will not be a formal part of the basic program, so everyone interested can easily attend. Due to recently having COVID, I'm in the sort of tail end of COVID, I've decided to reshape and re-record the final teaching I gave online on the 27th of April, as I suspect I was struggling with the infamous COVID brain fog. Yes, it's real, though perhaps not really real, as inherently existent. The material on emptiness in relation to the important final verses of chapter 4, which we're currently studying, will be carried over to the new teachings next year, where justice can be done to their complexity and their profound implications for understanding precisely how we can uproot our mental delusions from the root. This is crucial, because without being able to do this, how are we possibly going to be able to carry out the Bodhisattva's deeds on behalf of others to help them similarly uproot the roots of delusion that cause all their sufferings? So without doing this, what hope is there that we might generate a genuine great compassion, one predicated on accurately, thoroughly understanding the predicament of all our suffering mothers. So without realizing emptiness, we are like a bird with only one wing. As Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, the wrong concept, the ignorance that believes something exists from its own side, is the true cause of suffering, the principal one. From that delusion and karma arise, bringing about all the various samsaric sufferings, the heavy sufferings of the hells, the heavy suffering of the hungry ghosts, the heavy suffering of animals, the heavy suffering of the human beings, the heavy suffering of the Shura and Ashura beings, the suffering of rebirth, the suffering of sickness, the suffering of old age, and the suffering of death. All that comes from there. So this is just to intimate some of the material that presented in the new block of teachings on Shantideva's vital text, commencing in 2024. So returning to the commentary we're up to, we're currently looking at verse 9 of chapter 4 of Shantideva's text. It comes under the heading given by Galt Subje, even if one obstructs the virtue of another Bodhisattva, it is similar to that, and one will go to the lower realms. And the verse reads, and should others for even a single moment hinder or obstruct his wholesome deeds, by weakening the welfare of all, there will be no end to their rebirth in lower states. So the logic of this verse can be easily understood by extending the logic of the immediately preceding verse, which had the heading, one will degenerate from the welfare of others. You recall from last week that the logic in verse 8 was that if one falls down from one's bodhisattva resolve, this will impact not just ourselves, the perpetrator of the wrongdoing in this case, but the welfare of all others. In other words, the loss, the elimination of the positive deeds that we would have done on their behalf and would continuously have done on their behalf, because we'd promised to engage in activities for their benefit, not just now, but right up until the point of enlightenment, will be withdrawn, rescinded, taken back. Sentient beings, therefore, who might otherwise have benefited, will be left bereft accordingly. So that verse 8 read, this for a bodhisattva is the heaviest of downfalls. For should it ever happen, the welfare of all will be weakened. So here in verse 9, the same logic is applied to explain the extent and the gravity of the loss incurred when we obstruct a bodhisattva's, any bodhisattva's deeds, actions. The verse again reads, and should others for even a single moment hinder or obstruct his wholesome deeds by weakening the welfare of all, there will be no end to their rebirth in lower states. Galt Subje explains the intent of this verse by quoting from the Sutra of the magical emanations definitely pacifying, which says, it is heavier to obstruct the virtue of a bodhisattva, offering just one instance of food or drink to an animal, than to rob all sentient beings of Jan Budvipa of their food and kill them. Geshe Doga stresses that we must pay real attention to this scenario being invoked here, because from our current stance, we are incapable of distinguishing a bodhisattva from a non-bodhisattva. Our perception is hopelessly limited in this respect. We're lucky to even see the nose in front of our faces. Geshe Doga gives an example, the example of the Kunu Lama. You'll notice Rinpoche quoted Rinpoche's requests that we recite and study his text at the beginning of the talk today. Geshe Doga's example of the Kunu Lama, whom Geshe Doga, as well as did Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, had the great good fortune of meeting in India and receiving precious teachings from him. In particular, as Geshe Doga describes in his commentary to verse 9, the Kunu Lama transmitted the rare commentorial lineage of Shantideva's Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life directly to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It was thought by some to have been lost. From there, it has been carefully handed down by our own precious teachers. Many of us, of course, will have had the enormous good fortune of receiving His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teachings on Shantideva in person. It is therefore, as Geshe Doga explains, to be considered a close lineage, and to receive it in any form is a great blessing. Yet, the Kunu Lama appeared, in Geshe Doga's words, a simple beggar, dressed in what Geshe Doga said can only be described as rags, and was so humble and so unassuming that we would pass him in the street without remark. Even the Venerable Sangha dismissed him as a simple, wandering ascetic, perhaps also a little crazy. Of course, all of this suddenly changed when His Holiness the Dalai Lama suddenly announced the Kunu Lama as one of his own personal gurus. Need we add, everyone was bowing to him then. Geshe Doga goes on to describe how the Kunu Lama gave him, Geshe Doga, a tiny seed from the Bodhi tree. I quote, "When I went to see him, he gave me a seed from the Bodhi tree and said I should recite the mantra of the Buddha and eat the seed, as that will be really good for you. Even though," Geshe Doga continues, "I didn't take particular note of it at the time, when I look back, I can really feel that it was a very significant gesture. Receiving that seed and instruction from the Kunu Lama Rinpoche was almost a prediction that I would really try to take a strong interest in teachings such as the Bodhisattva Charya Vatara. I received teachings on the Bodhisattva Charya Vatara from His Holiness, who received it from the Kunu Lama Rinpoche. I had that privilege of studying the text, and now I have the opportunity to teach and share it with you." End of quote. So I share this reminiscence of Geshe Doga's because it's truly inspiring. And I want to relate another reminiscence here, connected one, this time from an American, Thupten Pemo, who had the fortune also of meeting the Kunu Lama in the 1970s in Nepal. The account is from Thupten Tado. She and a number of other foreigners had gone to Nepal to study Buddhism, and they asked Rinpoche if there was anything he needed that they could supply. He said, "No, I have all I need because I have bodhicitta." And the next day, he sent an offering of 1 rupee equivalent of 3 or 4 cents at the time, to each of the foreign students who had visited him the preceding day. So I'm just sort of thinking about this story. These fortunate students likewise received an amazing and very skillfully calculated gift. Each of those rupee coins was again no other than the seed of bodhicitta, from which the entire Mahayana path to enlightenment springs. And the choice of a single rupee coin was also perhaps a way of implanting the realization in their minds that they too had no want of anything, as they also had bodhicitta or were aspiring towards it. On another level, he was perhaps teaching the foreigners the deep meaning of renunciation, not just of immediate worldly needs and pleasures, but the vastly overrated values of cyclic existence itself. The message, therefore, don't let these stand in your way, especially when steeped in the luxuries found in your foreign cultures. However we interpret it, it is clear that they were also no longer poor in either material resources or spirits, because they had received the bodhicitta, the seed of bodhicitta, from a great hidden Bodhisattva who appeared as a layman, sadhu in this case, who lived with his longtime female companion, the Drikung Kandra. The suggestion here is that he was also an advanced tantric practitioner engaged in completion stage practices. So later, when the Kunu Lama was in the middle of a teaching on the wisdom chapter of the jewel ornament of liberation, the Kunu Lama died. And as Thupten Thado narrates, he died without any change in the kindly, peaceful expression on his face. His ashes were enshrined in various reliquaries in regions straddling the Indo-Tibetan region on the border of the state of Himachal Pradesh. His Holiness the Dalai Lama always pays homage to the Kunu Lama with folded hands when he teaches Shantideva's guide. To bring all this back to our immediate topic, by merely hearing, let alone understanding or fully understanding Shantideva's verses, we also receive the seed of bodhicitta. And by relying on the oral teachings of our precious lineage lamas, we also receive and share in the direct blessings of the same transmission lineage that is the ideal environment for nurturing those seeds. So we shouldn't underestimate how remarkable our opportunity currently is, especially when, like me, we are so impoverished in merit. Therefore, for reasons of auspiciousness, I would like to quote several verses from the Kunu Lama, Negri Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen, from his praises for bodhicitta, titled The Jewel Lamp, a Praise of Bodhicitta, the text that Rinpoche is suggesting we recite very often along with Shantideva's guide. Verse 12 reads in that text, if one investigates to find the supreme method, for accomplishing the aims of oneself and others, it comes down to bodhicitta alone. Being certain of this, develop it with joy. And the next verse, when knowledge of all modes of meditation is reached, the rain of precious Dharma from the form cloud body nourishes the shoots of the good that people do. End of quote. So in the Kunu Lama's verse, the form body cloud refers, as Kabje Zopa Rinpoche explains, to a water holder, which in this case is another way of saying that an enlightened being causes the rain of Dharma to stream down upon all sentient beings, which allows them to develop their virtues. End of quote. So it does seem reasonable then to say that the capacity to give birth to these shoots of virtue is represented by that single but unimaginably potent seed from the Bodhi tree that Geshe Doga received from the Kunu Lama on that special day, and the significance of which, by Geshe Doga's own reckoning, was only fully realized later when Geshe Doga gave his extensive commentary on Shantideva's guide, upon which I have so gratefully and extensively relied upon in this body of teachings, and I've also shared with you by providing a complete set of transcripts for this word by word, line by line commentary of the entire text. So we can even apply the meaning of the Kunu Lama's second verse, just quoted, to the Shantideva verse currently under investigation in this class. If, the big if we obstruct the deeds of a Bodhisattva, destined as they are to ripen for the sake of others, we will impair the opportunity that sentient beings would otherwise have had to receive the rain of Dharma. And to quote the first lines of another of the Kunu Lama's verses, the good that bodhicitta does, the good that is bodhicitta does not give fruit just once. Until the knowledge of all modes of meditation is reached, it will not finish, but gets even greater. This verse indicates how the effect of obstructing a bodhisattva's deeds does much more than just block those specific actions of a particular bodhisattva on that particular historical occasion. How so? Because a bodhisattva's deeds are endlessly increasing and getting stronger, more powerful, even after enlightenment, as Kabje Zopa Rinpoche explains, if we interrupt even a moment, a split second, the magnificently coordinated trajectory of their glorious work, based as it is on the practice of the six perfections, we also potentially disturb, obstruct, or even sever the future expansion of those deeds, which are destined, because they were dedicated in that way, to bring joy and fulfillment to others over vast slabs of time. It follows that due to our interference in their enlightened deeds on our part, we correspondingly incur inconceivable and always expanding negative karma that will impair our capacity to perform virtue over similarly incalculable spans of time. As we know from the great Lojong text, Wheel of Sharp Weapons, this is due to the Wheel of Sharp Weapons returning which is to say, it is the inevitable backlash or whiplash of our own negative karma. It has nothing whatsoever, this is really important, nothing whatsoever to do with the Bodhisattva. Because from the Bodhisattva side, they wish continuously for the benefit and happiness of all sentient beings, even or especially those who are obstructive and extremely difficult. Even those seeking to murder or harm them with a weapon or other violent way. This is the nature of a bodhisattva's concern. It's completely undaunted by the attitude and behavior coming from the side of the person, the afflicted person. So in this way, we arrive at Gyaltsabje's next heading, which further pursues this vital point, the reason why it is so. Gyaltsabje commences his commentary to verse 10 with a rhetorical question. Why are the above-mentioned actions of infinite negativity? Hence, it's immediately clear that this verse will further explicate the meaning of the previous two verses. And the verse itself reads, "For if my being is impaired by destroying the joy of even one creature, then what need is there to mention destroying the joy of creatures vast as space?" So Shantideva is spelling out how the mechanics of karmic operations and the unimaginably vast scale entailed play their role. But we're talking about the destruction of the joy of creatures as vast as space. Only a Buddha could comprehend the cosmological scale involved here. As sentient beings are countless and live even in other galaxies and other world systems. So if, as Geshe-Doga explains in his commentary to this verse, our own potential for higher status is damaged by destroying the happiness of just one single sentient being, then we can only imagine the exponentially magnified scale of negativity incurred when we're responsible for the destruction of the happiness of not one, but limitless sentient beings. The very situation that arises, for example, the instant we abandon our bodhicitta mind, if that was to happen. And the effects of that abandonment will impair us as we move into the future. So the meticulous nature of Shantideva's presentation is powerfully apparent here, as is the potent force of his poetically conveyed logic. It is really important to spend time with each verse in this way and then make connections between them, or rather identify the connections that Shantideva himself is organically making as the composer of these precious words. Otherwise, Shantideva's intent might be glossed over. This happens when we read hastily. So I just mentioned that by way of encouragement for taking some time off, quality time, to do some slow reading of Shantideva's text. So the next heading of Gyaltsabje is "One will become far from attaining a ground." Verse 11, "Thus those who have the force of an awakening mind, as well as the force of falling from it," which I've just sort of mentioned, stay revolving within cyclic existence and for a long time are hindered in reaching the bodhisattva levels. End of quote. So an example of this intricately weaving and always persuasive logic, Shantideva is now laying out the karmic consequences before one who has first generated bodhicitta, then given it up, and then yet again taken it up again. The result, they will struggle to make coherent, steady, upward progress on the path. Karmically speaking, Gyaltsabje suggests that we will bounce, and we might add like a tennis ball, between rebirth in the upper and lower realms. In other words, the karma acquired by this complex changing of our mind will cause us to oscillate between happy and unhappy rebirths. This is because there is a blend of positive and negative karma. Positive, when we did, at least for a time, uphold bodhicitta, then negative, because we gave it up or corrupted it in a significant way, and then yet again positive, because we sought to take it up again and proceed, at least hopefully, as initially planned when we took the vow for the first time. So we must relate this scenario to our own experience. In the midst of a positive ripening situation, we often suddenly experience tragedy or depression or some major obstacle. Or in situations when we're sincerely trying to be virtuous, it seems that we only stir up more powerful negative minds and disturbing feelings, even to the extent that we lose hope that we can successfully practice at all. Then suddenly we regain inspiration and throw ourselves into practice again. So this is like a kind of microcosmic account of the vast account that was just given by Shantideva. The conclusion we must draw, in terms of the cosmological account, is that we must never let our bodhicitta lapse or deteriorate. This means we must always be constantly vigilant in protecting our three doors so as not to create misdeeds that will, as Geshe-Doga puts it, and in relation to the last verse, cause one's own status to degenerate, our own high status to degenerate, meaning our human rebirth in this case. In summary, if we intend to achieve the highest enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, then we must constantly and carefully maintain this precious mind, not allowing even the slightest degeneration, for if it is allowed to deteriorate or even momentarily lapse, how will we achieve our intended goal? Moreover, we must see adhering to the mind of bodhicitta itself as precisely the best way of growing, cultivating, not just our ethical commitments, but the shoot of our bodhicitta, because the seed has already sprouted. Everything we need for our best practice of virtue is to be found already embodied there. As Akunu Lama says in verse 27 of his text, bodhicitta, which causes incomparable enlightenment to be obtained, is water, since it washes away the stains of non-virtue. It is a hand, since it gathers virtue. It is a whip, since it urges one to practice the holy Dharma. Yet, as we've been examining, this extraordinary capacity of bodhicitta to grow to a point where it can utterly fulfill our own and others' wishes is exactly why so much damage and loss is incurred when it is damaged or squandered. Everything we needed for obtaining perfect compassion and wise practice was already there. The greatest of jewels was in our hand, already in our hand. Therefore, why would we, how could we decide to step away, to fall away from that? What afflicted mind was at play? And in order to receive what exactly? What were we thinking? It is as though the Maras had supplanted our thought and were manically dancing in the conveniently vacated space of our virtue, one that they could rightfully claim as theirs, because this is how Maras operate. So, of course, we're referring to the delusions here. Of this precious human rebirth, Shantideva says, no self-deception could be worse after gaining such a chance than not cultivating virtue. Nothing could be blinder. So, having received a precious human rebirth then, and in dependence on that, and with the blessings of the three jewels, having actually generated at least a mind aspiring to enlightenment for the benefit of others, to let it to deteriorate is so foolish, so self-deceiving as to one's own potential, as to be utterly incomprehensible. So sure, as explained in earlier classes of this unit, we can take the Bodhisattva's vows again, but this comes with a penalty. As Kunsang Pelden cautions, it is still the grim case that, and I quote, those who at one moment commit a heavy downfall of abandoning bodhicitta and at another moment vigorously embrace it, alternating back and forth, and I've got in brackets as Shantideva is describing this verse, will long be prevented from attaining the Bodhisattva grounds, let alone great and ultimate enlightenment. And Kunsang Pelden continues, that even if a downfall is purified through the force of confession, so that they are saved from rebirth in the lower realms, a blockage is created nonetheless for the further appearance of good qualities in the mind stream, and this will delay the attainment of the grounds of realizations and other qualities. Take, for example, the story of Tilopa, who is said to have been capable of achieving supreme accomplishment in 7 days. But because he secretly took a handful of sesame seeds, he had to wait several months. So this last story is illustrative, and this is, I think, a crunch, of how our negative actions, even the slightest ones, delay or postpone our realization. So if you're wondering why your realizations are postponed, there's a clue to the answer here. This is why Kabje Zopa Rinpoche and all our precious teachers stress so emphatically our need to continuously purify and accumulate merit. Purify negative karma and accumulate virtue. Shantideva is now drawing towards a conclusion of this sort of suite, if you like, of verses, as indicated by Gotsabje's heading, which reads, if one does not abandon negativity and downfalls, one will stay in the lower realms. Verse 12 reads, therefore, just as I have promised, shall I respectfully accord my actions. If from now on I make no effort, I shall descend from lower to lower states. So Gotsabje says in commentary, therefore, I should practice respectfully the trainings to achieve enlightenment for the welfare of sentient beings according to my promise. If after having generated bodhicitta and taken the vows, I do not make an effort, I will continuously go from lower realm to lower realm due to heavy downfalls. End of quote. So the meaning of this is obvious. The word respectfully indicates that we should proceed to accord all of our actions and practices with the immense moral dignity entailed in our bodhicitta commitment. This mind of bodhicitta is to be regarded with folded hands and immense reverence, and it is to imbue, saturate, pervade everything we do. One also trains in the practices to obtain enlightenment for the sake of others with great humility. We are deeply humble because all of our thoughts of self-cherishing and self-grasping have been put aside as core obstacles to our pure practice, our practice of purity. We have forgone our worldly arrogance, which in the end is not worth even a puff of air. So what does making no effort mean in the context of Shantideva's verse? Geshe Doga indicates that when Gyaltsabje mentions our need to make an effort, he is specifically referring to our determination not to breach any of the commitments of the bodhicitta vows, and thus not to perform any downfalls, the serious consequences of which have already been so pungently described in terms of the root downfalls, the chief being abandoning bodhicitta itself. The reference to falling from one lower state to another, and even another, is really worth examining because it describes how a state of dereliction of our ethical responsibilities fosters the ripening of yet more and more stronger, more powerful afflictive minds, and hence we act yet more unskillfully, more destructively, and thus create the karmic conditions to fall even lower, even lower. So this is what dereliction and kind of deterioration means in this case. It's a collapse of our capacity to perform virtue. And that is why we fall lower and lower and lower. In his commentary to Aryadeva's 400, Gyaltsabje indicates, I quote, one's actions precipitate one downwards like that attraction, referring to a father's love for his son. Since a mind directed by attachment runs downhill like water. Therefore, most people in the world go down to the hells and so forth. Thus, there is no need to mention liberation. Even a higher rebirth is hard to find. And Pabonka Rinpoche similarly says, their minds are disturbed and bedeviled by the three poisonous delusions, so that they have no control over their minds and are mad. They will fall down that great cliff leading to the lower realms, and for many eons, their bodies will be indistinguishable from the flames there. Thus, Shantideva's reference to descending from lower to lower realms encapsulates via provocative imagery the grave dangers of losing our personal autonomy by yielding to non-virtue. This is really applying to our daily lives. we're being made to picture it in terms of the consequences. The consequences are being pictured, made visible by Shantideva here. The fact is, negative minds engender further negative minds. Negative deeds engender further negative deeds. Negative karmas compound further negative karmas. And thus we're trapped in a downward spiral from which it will be increasingly difficult to escape. Thus, as Shantideva's heading indicates, I will stay in the lower realms. Not just visit like some itinerant fruit picker, but stay. The lower realms will become our natural habitat, our seemingly permanent home. I'm using the word seemingly here because, yes, we can escape the lower realms, but the difficulty of doing so is enormous and gets harder and harder the lower we go. So the great sorrow here, this is very important, shift of focus in Shantideva's sort of presentation, is not for ourselves. We're not to feel, oh dear, this is going to be my plight, because that's putting the focus on us. And that's not what Shantideva's getting at here. As Geshe Topton says, and I quote, it's possible to regenerate such a bodhicitta, virtuous mind, but we will have wasted much time reaching an objective that we had previously achieved. End of quote. So in other words, though we might somehow manage to step onto the path of a bodhisattva again, if we, or say we're already on it, if we fail to apply ourselves in ways that will enable us to proceed and advance or even stay on it, then our tumbling into lower states is announced. As Geshe Jumper Tekchok says, and I quote, we have taken the Bodhisattva vow, and if we do not abandon faults and practice virtue as we accepted, we will accumulate faults. That is what will happen if we do not restrain faulty conduct. When we take the Bodhisattva vow, we take the commitment to practice the three moralities of restraining from wrong conduct, of gathering Dharma virtues, and of accomplishing the welfare of the sentient beings. If we do not bother to do as promised, we will not refrain from faulty conduct, and therefore we will engage in faulty conduct. And the result of that is going from the lower realms to the lower realms. End of quote. So you recall again that someone who has accepted the mind of bodhicitta at an aspirational level has not actually taken the bodhisattva vows. So it's still the case, however, that this pattern of inclining to lower rebirths will work in the same way if we neglect practicing assiduously the three moralities, so whether we've taken vows or aspiring to them or not. We will, as Shantideva bluntly puts it in his training anthology, be heavy with the stench of immorality. Gyaltsen Sabje's next heading, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are indifferent. Geshe Jumper Gutso says, being indifferent here means that if we do not abandon evil and downfalls, there is nothing the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can do to remove the ripening results. They would not be able to help us if our evils and downfalls remain without diminishing and will consequently go to the lower realms. So indifferent in this sense means that our blockages are such that the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas cannot break through to us. They cannot reach us due to the heavy impenetrability of our negativities. We are embalmed in our own toxic juices, as it were. This inability to do anything to help us due to our own side is rendered explicitly by Shantideva's next two verses in chapter 4. Although for the benefit of every creature, countless Buddhas have passed by, yet I was not an object of their care because of my own mistakes. 14. And if I continue to act like this, again and again shall I undergo suffering in unhappy realms, sickness, bondage, laceration, and the shedding of blood. So relating this back to our immediate experience, our immediate situation, we're being warned of the danger of complacency, whereby we consider that even if we mess up, even big time, there's nothing to worry about, as the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will reach over and rescue us, pluck us from the implications of our misdeeds and their fruits. So we must call this way of thinking a rescue fantasy. But this is not the way things are. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas cannot pluck us out of trouble like a thorn from the skin. However, as Geshe Doga proposes, we do frequently engage in precisely such rescue remedy behaviour, such wishful thinking, when we rationalise along the lines, and I quote, "Even though I've not managed too well to date, things will get better later on." Or, "Oh, maybe I didn't do so well this year, but that's fine. I'll do better next year." Or, "Next time round, I'll do better." End of quote. And yes, we must apply this to our spiritual practice. I messed up today by generating the mind of anger while standing in a supermarket aisle, getting impatient I wasn't being served on time, for example. But don't worry, I'll do Vajrasattva purification practice this evening or even tomorrow morning. All will be okay, trust me. These are classic examples of procrastination, specious and spurious rationalization, and such can prove even fatal. The karmic consequences can be very grievous indeed, such as having a murderous rage, for example, and not making efforts to remedy that and purify it, as well as undo the damage that that mind might have caused to others, of course, and make some sort of effort to heal the damage we've done. So this idea of the problem of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas being indifferent resonates with a verse from the Guru Puja, verse 46, which reads, "To those untamed by countless past Buddhas, the unruly transmigratory beings of this degenerate age, who are difficult to subdue, you accurately show the good way of those gone to bliss. Compassionate refuge saviour, I make requests to you." End of quote. So we are, or are untamed by countless Buddhas of the past because we were so filled with negativities and delusions that we were from our own side untamable. And the proof, if we need proof, we need look need look no further than to acknowledge that we are not yet enlightened. Kabje Rinpoche often makes this point. He says, look, if you're not enlightened, then this is definitely applying to you. Kabje Rinpoche says, the self-cherishing mind that controls you, it is the self-cherishing mind that controls you. It has harmed numberless sentient beings in the past and continues to do so in the present. It has prevented you from achieving enlightenment, Buddhahood, from beginningless rebirths until now. As long as you follow this selfish mind, it will prevent you from becoming enlightened in the future and will continuously harm you and all other sentient beings. This is the great demon, the enemy, the self-cherishing thought. So, indeed, the very fact that we find ourselves currently capable of making virtuous requests and to even blame totally and seek to overcome this demon of selfishness is because at some point we've created a seed of virtue that our precious guru, with their prescience, has been able to seize upon and cultivate. No Buddha in the past has been able to do this. By way of commentary to the verse I've just quoted from the Guru Puja, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, this passage explains cultivating respect by reflecting upon the kindness of the Guru in the context of both the Sutra and Tantric vehicles. It is a fact that up until now, many Buddhas have come into the world system, and during the present precious eon alone, there have been previous Buddhas, such as Mahakashyapa, during their advents. However, we did not have the opportunity to engage in the practice of Dharma. Therefore, we are more related to Shakyamuni Buddha. As explained in the practical guide on the stages of the path, your guru is kinder than all the Buddhas and even kinder than Buddha Shakyamuni. His Holiness then goes on to say, to ask us, you should reflect. I, who have been left behind by all the Buddhas who have appeared in the past, have this opportunity to practice through your kindness alone. His Holiness continues, contemplate. What would your fate be if you were not under the care of this guru? Thinking along such lines will enable you to realize his great kindness. End of quote. So in this way, we're returned to Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, as it does to the deeper intent of these verses of Shantideva here. Although rains of Dharma have hitherto poured down, we have been unable to receive them. No benefit has come because our failure to practice virtue and our immense capacity for creating non-virtue has rendered us impervious and immune to the Guru Buddha's blessings. The fault, Geshe-Doga stresses, is not the lack of rain, but lies with the seed. Likewise, the rain of Dharma from innumerable Buddhas has fallen, But because of their faults, many sentient beings have not benefited from that, and thus realizations and so forth have not sprouted in their minds. End of quote. So now, finally, in the manifested form of Habje Zopa Rinpoche, a Buddha has appeared who is not indifferent in the sense just described. Somehow, he has got through to us just this once. Somehow, the moisture of mercy has entered into us, and we've even planted the seed of virtue in our continuum, and possibly are also now carrying the most precious seed of all, Bodhisattva, in the rich soil of our now softened and moistened, compassionate hearts. Therefore, never before, over the entire history of our own beginningless time, has this been able to happen, or to be said to have happened. So the great challenge, indeed the very greatest challenge, therefore, is to practice exactly as the Guru Buddha has instructed. And this means we're to embrace the mind of Bodhicitta with its radically transformative yoga of exchanging self and others as our core practice. In the meantime, if we make intense prayers and dedications, as His Holiness has recommended in his colophon, his recently composed colophon of his moving poem, A Prayer for the Swift Return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, we maximize the prospect of being with our holy Guru Kabje Zopa Rinpoche in future lifetimes. And if we pray for the Guru's swift return to guide us again, we create the conditions to meet with our precious Guru in this very lifetime again. Very soon. Very, very soon. So we do this out of the most unimaginably strong gratitude to Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, through whom we might also have met our other precious teachers. To really appreciate this, His Holiness invites us to ask, if you had not been taken care of by this Guru, what would your fate have been? Think. It is only due to his kindness that I can be counted among human beings. So the fact that we can look down and not see 4 hoofs beneath 4 furry fetlocks instead of 2 feet is entirely due to the Guru's great kindness. We're talking here about the Guru's influence on our way we lay down our karma. So His Holiness immediately adds a comment that I feel we should take closely to heart. The teacher with whom you live daily and who guides you in a gradual process is the one who is more kind. So Geshe Ngawandagi gave me this advice many years ago when I was standing in line to offer a kata to Geshe Ngawandagi, who was giving a public discourse in a community hall in Sydney. And he leant over and whispered, the Guru who lives with you is the kindest of all. So though this was a reference to Gendoga, with whom I and other students had travelled to Sydney with to see his teacher, Geshe Ngawandagi, it pertains to all our precious teachers who have manifested in a accessible to us at the current time. So with Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, it means that by setting up the various FPMT centres around the world, as well as the extraordinary other activities, such as the Sarah J. Food Fund, the education projects in Nepal, and by constantly travelling around the world to visit us, even when we make no or little effort to visit him, Kabje Zopa Rinpoche must be considered by many thousands of fortunate citizens of this globe and beyond as the most kind guru of all, because he has he has arranged, involves management, to live with us daily. He has manifested in our realm and turned the wheel of Dharma in a way that innumerable people on this earth can appreciate and hear. Over and over again, he has caught planes and trains and cars and ships and a myriad other magical means, such as visiting us in the space of our dreams, in the places where we live. Nick Rebush reported the other day in his moving tribute to Rinpoche, currently there are 141 centres, projects and services in 34 countries worldwide. So even if we are too lazy or too preoccupied or too obscured to make pilgrimage to see Rinpoche wherever he was teaching, Rinpoche would arrange to come and see us, not just once, but repeatedly. So I want to just move a little further in this sort of investigation. There is no difference between Shakyamuni Buddha and the Holy Guru. His Holiness advises us that when we do Guru Yoga, we should proceed precisely on this basis. And I quote, "There is no difference in qualifications between Shakyamuni Buddha and our own root Guru." End of quote. But as Shantideva has been explaining so clearly, there is a difference in their kindness. So this is the point, I feel, that we can extract from Shantideva's verses currently under investigation. And so to quote from verse 13 again, or quote verse 13 again, although for the benefit of every creature, countless Buddhas have passed by, yet I was not an object of their care because of my own mistakes. So now at last, despite our paucity of merit and the sheer weight of our great burden of mistakes, we have become an object of care of a Buddha appearing in the precious radiant form of Kabje Zopa Rinpoche. A classic analogy illuminates this point. In the heart of the path, Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, firstly, he quotes the Sakya Pandita, "Even though sunbeams are very hot, without a magnifying glass, they can't ignite a fire. It is the same with the blessings of the Buddhas. Without the Guru, they cannot enter the disciple." Just a little aside here, you can see how this is exactly resonating with Shantideva's verses we've just been exploring. Kabje Zopa Rinpoche goes on, Dawa Rinchen, a disciple of Gawa Gotsangpa, said a similar thing. When the intervening obstructions are purified, the power of the sun focuses on the tinder by the dependent arising of the clear magnifying glass. When the thought of faults is purified, the blessings of the Buddhas of the 10 directions. So Rinpoche now elaborates those 2 verses. Just as the sun can perform the function of burning tinder only in dependence upon the self-condition of a magnifying glass, all the past, present, and future Buddhas can perform the function of guiding sentient beings to enlightenment only in dependence on the Guru. Even the Buddhas themselves cannot happen without the Guru. They are born from the Guru. As Buddha Jhana explains, before the Guru, there is not even the name Buddha. Therefore, we should regard our Gurus as more precious than all the Buddhas of the 10 directions. Rinpoche continues, another effective way to think of the Guru is to think of the Guru as being like a rope and ourselves as being down in a deep pit of fire. Being in samsara is like being in a fire. When we have fallen into a fiery pit, the people standing at the top of the hole can't rescue us without a rope. In a similar way, without the Guru, all the Buddhas of the 3 times and the 10 directions can't guide us to enlightenment. End of quote. So the crunch. We somehow, miraculously, have become an object of care of a Buddha appearing in the precious radiant form of Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, who can guide us to enlightenment. So there's also no difference between Kabje Zopa Rinpoche and Shantideva. This is something we can fully realize only by following the advice in the great Master Shantideva's text, A Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and thus actualizing the qualities of a bodhisattva on behalf of others. The meaning that powerfully flows from each stanza of Shantideva's text is none other than the sacred stream of Dharma pouring down from the empty, luminous purity of the Dharmakaya. Therefore, our precious Guru and Shantideva are to be viewed as inseparable. What this means? This means that by keeping this text as our most precious friend, we will also be pleasing the Holy Guru Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, as well as making real offerings to help all mother sentient beings. In this twofold and perfectly integrated way, what could be more marvelous than this? When Kabje Zopa Rinpoche speaks passionate words of praise to Shantideva, it is obvious that we can also swing those praises around to Kabje Zopa Rinpoche himself, to describe Kabje Zopa Rinpoche himself. And as this is the last formal session of this basic program course, and because of the nature of recent events, I thought to take the opportunity and the liberty of doing exactly this. So the following praise to Shantideva by Kabje Zopa Rinpoche is in Rinpoche's The Nectar of Bodhicitta, a Lama Yeshe Wisdom archive publication. Much has been written about this great bodhisattva. He had complete control over death and rebirth, completely the opposite of us, ordinary beings who have no control at all. Every action of body, speech, and mind was holy. There was not even one thing he did that he had even the slightest taste of self-cherishing. Every action, tiny and great, was done purely for others, to help release them from suffering. Of the thousands of amazing pundits in the great monastic university of Nalanda, he was peerless. He was a role model for anyone seeking the spiritual path. We should not only follow his advice in a guide to Bodhisattva's way of life, but we should see his remarkable qualities and how vital it is that we try to emulate him. We should learn about the way he led his life with such great compassion, with a well-subdued mind leading to actions of body and speech that were also well subdued, doing only what was of benefit to others and never doing anything for his own sake. His only desire was to lead other beings to everlasting peace. And because of that, he never had a problem. There was not the slightest bit of confusion or agitation in his life. Problems arise from the unsubdued mind, the mind grasping at a self. And when that is transcended, all problems are transcended. The three poisons of ignorance, attachment, and anger are destroyed in a being such as Shantideva, because the egocentric mind, the self-cherishing thought, has been overcome. End of quote. So I feel we should, or we can, take these words of praise as also pith instructions for ourselves, to apply to ourselves. We should pray that we might destroy the self-cherishing mind by engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds, exactly as instructed by Shantideva, and exactly as instructed by Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, and exactly as instructed by our other precious gurus, and exactly as advised by Shakyamuni Buddha. Because all these instructions are the same. They lead to the exact same enlightened result, endowing all our suffering mothers with temporal and limitless perfected benefit. There's another prominent aspect of, or key aspect of Kabje Zopa Rinpoche's praise to Shantideva, which I'd just like to touch upon. Rinpoche says, in fact, Shantideva was a hidden yogi who already had great qualities. He was what is called kusali, which means having virtue. When it is used for a person, it means one who does only virtuous actions, but doesn't show virtue on the outside. Shantideva is invariably used as a prime example of this. Rinpoche continues, it appears to many people that my guru Lama Yeshe, who is kinder than the 3 times Buddhas, was always busy doing things and enjoying himself, and that he didn't meditate. They didn't see any external signs of meditating, such as physically sitting in meditation posture. Rinpoche continues, many people thought Lama was very worldly. They didn't recognize his inner practice, his inner realizations, but just judged him from the outside, from what they saw with their eyes. But a little interlude here. You can see that this resonates very strongly with the problem of not recognizing a bodhisattva as a bodhisattva and therefore potentially obstructing their deeds, with the consequences that Shantideva has laid out so clearly in the verses that we've just been looking at. So returning it again. Lama could not be overwhelmed by samsara. He enjoyed sense pleasures without the shortcomings of samsara. He enjoyed them purely for the sake of other sentient beings, to benefit other sentient beings, without being overwhelmed by disturbing thoughts, by the three poisonous minds. Lama actually meditated all the time. People used to think that Lama, who was in constant meditation, was not meditating, and that I, who never meditates, was meditating. So this account is truly inspiring, and many further biographical stories or anecdotes concerning Lama Yeshe's secret practice can be found in Adele Holz's major biography, Big Love. But the point I want to make here is that we can seamlessly extend Kabje Zopa Rinpoche's account of Shantideva and Lama Yeshe as hidden yogis to Rinpoche himself. The 11th Leilong Rinpoche has recently written in his swift return prayer to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, great mast of the teachings, supreme guide for East and West, hidden yogi, Lama Thupten Zopa, and Siddha Lama Zopa, Lord of the ocean of mandalas, with the wings of emptiness and compassion, you cross the waters of the generation and completion stage. Thupten Zopa Rinpoche, great hidden yogi, ornament of the activities of the Ganden tradition teachings, in truth, a great son of the victorious ones. So I'm now going to move towards the conclusion of this last class. And this particular section was written while I had COVID, but didn't know I had COVID. So I just mentioned that. Firstly, quoting Shantideva's verse 1.4. This precious human body, qualified with its freedoms and richnesses, is extremely difficult to find again. If I don't obtain the benefits with this body, how can I hope to attain a precious body again in the future? Kabje Zopa Rinpoche comments on this verse as, we have faith in the teachings. We are here at a time when the Buddha has descended and we are able to follow his teachings. We have all the right conditions to attain bodhicitta and to achieve full enlightenment. All these incredible conditions have come together to create this wonderful opportunity for us. When we think about all the other beings on this planet and how few have any of these conditions, it is truly amazing. This is why Shantideva asks if we can ever hope to find such a rebirth again. To attain anything we need, we have to create the causes. And the causes for a perfect human rebirth are perfect morality, great generosity, and stainless prayers for such a rebirth. This is what we have been diligently working towards for countless lifetimes, and now we have it. End of quote. So again, these right conditions to attain bodhicitta have only come about through the kindness of our most precious root guru, Kabje Zopa Rinpoche. Therefore, our diligent work in this and future lifetimes must be none other than to fulfill this bodhisattva, this bodhicitta aim. And we might add, we'll then have some weight or force behind our cry Rinpoche's quick return. In Kondrola's words, quickly return to guide us poor, wretched beings. Such is the desperate cry of us, your disciples. Return so that we may actually behold your presence and receive the blessings of your enlightened body, speech, and mind. So because recent events have been, I must admit, on my own part, in some ways upsetting, there's also been joy. So it's been a real mix of emotions arising. I just thought to say a few words about the problem of sinking into despondency, thinking in terms of loss. So I thought to quote Shantideva's stirring words found in verses 30 to 31 of chapter 7. So having mounted the horse of an awakening mind that dispels all discouragement and weariness, who, when they know of this mind that proceeds from joy to joy, would ever lapse into despondency. So the despondency mentioned here in the context of chapter 7, endeavour or enthusiasm in Berson's translation, would specifically refer to an underestimation of our own capacity and potential. Self-denigrating despondency in the Buddhist view is the third form of laziness, the other two being the laziness of procrastination and the laziness of being hyper busy, too busy to practice Dharma, a state perhaps we know all too well. As His Holiness says, it is said in the Garland of Jewels that it is necessary to accumulate infinite merits for innumerable kalpas in order to accomplish Buddhahood. But His Holiness immediately adds the critical advice: let us not be dismayed by this. How could I ever accumulate so much merit? Instead, let us make the wish to lead infinite sentient beings to the infinite qualities of Buddhahood by carrying out the infinite activities of a Bodhisattva over an infinite period of time. So by massively extending and expanding our sense of scale, time scale, viewing it in this way of long unfolding duration, we no longer need to feel downcast when even something very major, appears to have gone wrong. Something unexpectedly happens to disrupt our sense of security or controlled continuum. In the bigger frame of things, our intention to practice the Bodhisattva's path across lifetimes means that this moment in time is no more than a hiccup. These events which might seem to upset us and even traumatize us in some way, sort of unanchor us, I was losing my way there. Should not in any way be able to hinder the vast, powerful clarity of our Bodhisattva intention and our promise. Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, while we have this opportunity to create the causes for all possible good things, a better future rebirth, the cessation of all suffering, and full enlightenment, we must use it. So there's great imperative here in this must. It broaches no wishy-washy half-heartedness. Considered from this vast perspective, our sudden, abrupt reminder of impermanence can, in fact, this is the point I'm arriving at, be seen as a magical catalyst, a gift from Rinpoche, catalyzing us, prompting us, stirring us towards the task with renewed enthusiasm to engage in the Bodhisattva's way of life. And to support and guide us in this great endeavour, we call upon our most precious guru to swiftly return, not with the thought that we alone might benefit, but that all suffering sentient beings, without exception, must and shall. If we contemplate deeply, we will recognise that in order to fulfill our bodhicitta promise, we must ourselves become like Shantideva. And studying his precious texts and applying what we've learnt is the way to do this. As Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, Shantideva was once like us, but he worked on his mind until he became completely free from delusions. Therefore, he was a great inspiration. There have been many yogis who have done this. What makes him incredibly special for us, however, is his book, Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Not only does it lay out everything we need to do to become enlightened, it does so in a language that is beautiful and simple. It's a book that has inspired countless beings since it was written over 1,300 years ago. It tells us that we too can develop our mind to the levels of realizations that the great masters have attained and shows us how to do it. So for reasons of auspiciousness, I'm going to offer another quote from Rinpoche, because I feel that it brings together all the essential threads raised during our commentary and our study together of Shantideva's luminous verses. Rinpoche says, if we want to study and practice Mahayana Buddhism, Shantideva's book is the perfect guide. It shows us how to practice the most precious mind of bodhicitta, and especially the 6 perfections that a bodhisattva, a being with bodhicitta, must practice to develop towards full enlightenment. The perfections of charity, patience, morality, perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. In the 9th chapter, the chapter of wisdom, Shantideva explains emptiness incredibly clearly, which means his book contains the key things we need to know to take us to enlightenment: bodhicitta and emptiness. And as a bodhisattva, how to develop the qualities we need, such as generosity and patience. He shows us how to control our mind in order to destroy our selfish attitude and work only for others, the core of the Bodhisattva's teachings. He shows us how to purify our delusions by confessing our negative karma and other purification practices, and how important concentration is for our practice. Every word of this remarkable book leads us towards the wonderful mind of bodhicitta. the altruistic to attain complete enlightenment in order to best benefit all other sentient beings. There are so many people who have not even heard of bodhicitta, let alone received teachings on it. But even just hearing the word bodhicitta brings huge benefit. It energizes and inspires and strengthens our determination to work for others. A guide to a bodhisattva's way of life, therefore, shows us how to control our mind and develop our altruism, and how to understand reality, the truth of how things exist. Without such vital elements, no matter what we do, it can never be effective in making us happy. No matter how much money or how many possessions or friends we have, we will never succeed while the mind is not imbued with compassion and wisdom. Our friends cannot guide us towards true happiness, but this book can. It's the cure for all our mental ills. So, regarding the cure for all our mental ills, I'd like to briefly refer to verses 45 and 46, which are arriving towards the very end of chapter 4, which we're currently have been currently investigating. And those verses read, deluded, disturbing conceptions, when forsaken by the eye of wisdom and dispelled from my mind, where will you go? Where will you dwell in order to be able to injure me again later? Weak-minded, I have been reduced to making no effort. 46. If these disturbing conceptions do not exist within the objects, the sense organs, between the two, or somewhere else, then where do they exist? And how do they harm the world? They are like an illusion. Thus, I should dispel the fear within my heart and strive resolutely for wisdom. For no real reason, why should I suffer so much in hell? So Geshe Jumpa Gatso, in commentary to these verses, which are incredibly profound, I'm just touching on what the great masters have said about them to encourage us to begin to think a little about how this relates to the need to practice in a coherent fashion, method and wisdom. You think and are afraid that the afflictions are naturally existing, that when they are produced in the continuum, they are produced naturally, and that therefore you probably could not abandon them. But you should give up these ideas and fears. The afflictions are not naturally existing, but appear to be like an illusion. We need to build up our strength of mind and with our wisdom destroy the root of the afflictions just once. If we do so, the afflictions will all vanish for good. And in the words of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, commentary on the same verses, when we investigate carefully, we cannot find something, some powerful enemy called negative emotions. In reality, there is nothing there. For example, when we experience aversion or attachment, These emotions are not located in the ugly or beautiful object that causes them, nor are they found in our own minds, nor are they found anywhere else. When we look more closely, we realize it is through the coming together of causes and conditions that these emotions have so much power. They do not have any power of their own. They are simply a nexus of factors that we identify and label. In fact, the emotions, the disturbing emotions, some often use the word afflictions here as well, are entirely dependent on other things. Not just dependent here, entirely dependent on other things. They harm us. The harm they do to us is due to illusion. If we really understand this, the negative emotions cannot harm us. So this actually leads us back to the possibility, the real possibility that we can radically transform so that we might become like Shantideva, as Kabje Zopa Rinpoche has so inspiringly proposed as being within our reach. If the negative emotions existed from their own side by way of their own nature, they would be impermeable to causes and conditions, and nothing we could do, no remedy we could apply would have any effect whatsoever on their innate capacity to harm us. No effect whatsoever. So we say innate capacity. If they exist innately as harmful, then their capacity to harm is innate. It has nothing to do with my deluded mind. It's coming there from the side of the delusion itself that's harming me. So we get it's got nothing to do with how I'm responding or behaving or doing or not doing and so forth. Agency's out the window because all the problem is already embodied there in the delusion itself if it were inherently existent. But the good news, they don't exist in this self-existent, self-sustaining, self-presenting way. Not in the slightest. As merely imputed things, as dependent arisings, it is definite that we can cut them from the root by realizing their emptiness of self-nature, which is to say, their emptiness, right in the place where they appeared. They'll be discovered to be not existent at all. I know from Rinpoche's retreats that he'd often say, identify the object of negation of really existent I, and then sit on top of that, not existent at all. As His Holiness indicates, if we really understand this, the negative emotions cannot harm us. Thereby, our fear is dispelled. So as Shantideva has just said in those beautiful verses, then where do they exist? And how do they harm the world? They are like an illusion. Thus, I should dispel the fear within my heart and strive resolutely for wisdom. Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, actually, when we analyze, we discover this wrong concept, which is the root of samsara, this concept of inherently existent things to which we grasp as real, is really really funny, very strange. If we investigate, there's actually no root of samsara. No root of samsara, really. So the point here we're making, or Rinpoche is making, but I'm wishing to sort of make in the context of what I'm wanting to do at the conclusion here, is that if the root of samsara was innately or inherently existent, then there could be no path. So our capacity to transform is because there's nothing from our own side which can obstruct that transformation if we bring about the necessary causes and conditions within the nexus, as His Holiness puts it, of causes and conditions for those changes to occur. So this is the deep source of transformative inspiration that we find. And so I offer this as a final invitation for us all to continue studying this great text, which fully expounds the meaning of conventional and ultimate bodhicitta, even beyond the frame of the time that was spent together this year. So I hope we can continue from January next year, proceeding from the point where we're currently leaving off. So I just want to re-quote that moving advice that Rinpoche gives, and which I quoted at the very beginning of today's talk. The benefits of bodhicitta are boundless. If we try to explain them all, the explanation would never end. We should read books like the Kunu Lama, Rinpoche's, and Shantideva's again and again. So now recite the dedication prayers. We make very strong dedication because we've been able to maintain the conditions to be together over this duration of time. From Shantideva, for as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the miseries of the world. May all the pains of living creatures ripen solely upon myself, and through the might of the Bodhisattva Sangha, may all beings experience happiness. May the teachings, which are the sole medicine for suffering and the origin of every joy, be materially supported and honoured and abide for a very long time. I prostrate to Manjughosha, through whose kindness wholesome minds ensue, and I prostrate to my spiritual masters, through whose kindness I develop. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all sentient beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen never diminish, but increase more and more. May my venerable Lama's life be firm, his white divine action spread in the 10 directions, dispelling the darkness of all beings in the 3 realms. Just an interesting point. The other day, one of our Time Institute pujas, Geshe Doga, said that it was still very, very beneficial and auspicious to recite Kabje Zopa Rinpoche's long life prayer. And he said that Rinpoche may already have taken a new incarnation. So That's just interesting thought, isn't it? And so the wish granting, it's long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. To the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until some cyclic existence is ended. Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunat's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers, honouring the three jewels. Saviour of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And also the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama Tenzin Gyatso. Fearless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Munis, precious and complete teachings, 10, through explanation and practice, you wore the armour of patience, Zopa, that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make requests. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and mother living beings. You suddenly departed to peace. At this I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of the mind generation of the children of the victorious one, may the smile of the new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And for Tenzin Osel Hita, Venerable One, to you whose kindness excels that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us in intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request, O Lama, please, please live long. And Geshe Lobsang Doga, you with an immutable vow to spread to the limits of space the Dharma of the able one in general and the Dharma of the pure-minded conqueror, supreme, superior spiritual friend of unrepayable kindness, please remain for hundreds of eons and bestow the supreme and common cities. And for Geshe Thupten Sherab, beloved teacher, leading your students towards wisdom and compassion, explaining through exacting discernment the steps of the graduated path, you are the unequaled guide. Please live long, a long and stable life. And I'll just do a few of the multiplying mantras. Chom lende deshin chepa dra chompa yang dapa sope sange nampa nangze uki gelpola chag selo. Chanchu sempa sempa chempo kuntu zangpo la chag selo. Tayata penchagriya avabadani swaha. Om Duru Duru Jaya Mukhi Swaha. Tayata Penchagriya Avabadani Swaha. Om Duru Duru Jaya Mukhi Swaha. Tayata Penchagriya Avabadani Swaha. Om Duru Duru Jaya Mukhi Swaha. Thank you very much.